What's up, gang? Kevin here, Life22, and we are live. Just wanted to. I've been trying to rip this one off like a band-aid. I don't know. It was a meeting that kind of bugged the crap out of me, and I wanted to review it. So, in my angst to review this one, it was one of those things I just figured it was going to take me a minute. I didn't really have free time while the kids were, you know what I mean, like awake and, and trying to get up early and everything like that. And then you don't wake up early, and then it's like, oh, I got to get the kids to school, and you can't do it at work because, you're not going to work to do podcasts. So at least I'm not yet, right? Like, hopefully someday that's the goal, right? Someday this will be my full-time job because it's very stress relieving for me. It causes me some drama, but at the same time, like, it makes me feel better. It makes me feel better to be able to, like, talk about my stuff. So, coffee at 9:40 at night. It's good. But Sober October's going well. So it's not a traditional news over beers, but, actually the last few that I've done, I've been sober. So, but this will be a fun one. But, I was just like, you know what? Screw it. It's 9:40 at night. I want to get up early, but at the same time, I got up like 38 minutes early this morning. I got up, 2 mornings ago. This morning I overslept. But I got up an hour early the morning I told you guys I was going to get up and do a podcast, and I got up early, and I did a little workout, and I made breakfast, and then I did not have time for a podcast because I didn't get up as early as I wanted, but I did get up early, so baby steps. So I'm going to jump into this one, and hopefully I'll try to keep it short, but I always say that. I never do. That's why I was worried about this one, because this one, like, it's a 2.5 hour meeting, and I used to, like, play. I got the brief, the clips, so. So this is the last meeting of 2022. This was like this is pre the end of the year, so you have the, you've got the last year's Common Council. Obviously, they just did one on like the 4th or the 2nd, 3rd of this year, where they swore in 2 new aldermen. They kind of said goodbye to 2 other aldermen. So this is the last year here. And I've got a couple topics I do want to bring up at a later date that happened in previous council meetings throughout this past year that are not going to, or the previous year that are not going to, that, like one of them was like, something that one of the former aldermen said, and it was like, you know what, I hope that does not follow through. And I have like different topics I did want to bring up, but it's one of those things. So here we gizzily go. Let's see, we got to scroll down here. There we go. Boom. Ooh, here you go, Kevin, down on the lower third. In the home stretch. Hopefully y'all can hear this.
Was received by Mayor Olean. It is dated December 17th.
So this meeting, just for a little context, they're voting in the CRB. In the previous meetings, they had voted in a CRB, a civilian review board, and they voted in a civilian review board, and then the mayor, within his in the powers bestowed upon him by the city charter, essentially the operating agreement for the city, he submitted that he was going to veto. So now the Common Council has on their docket tonight, because they have 30 days to then. He has 30 days to veto it, or he has 30 days to veto it, and or like the next Common Council meeting before the end of like a 30-day cycle. So, or something like that. But then they have like 30 days to respond from the receipt of his response. And so they just, or they have to respond by the next Common Council meeting after the one they received it from. So something along those lines. He has 30 days to submit it. And whatever the Common Council meeting is that before the 30 days expires or something like that. And then, but in knowing that this is on the docket, we have a deployed officer that wrote a letter to the Common Council.
Addressing this letter to the Common Council to be read during the next meeting on 27 December 2022. I am making this request to share my opinion as a citizen of the city of Olean on my own behalf and not on behalf of either the City of Olean Police Department or the New York Army National Guard. I was made aware of Alderman Robinson's statement during the 13 December 2022 Common Council meeting regarding his views on military service members within the Olean Police Department. Alderman Robinson stated, quote, "We have some that are in the military that would rather go and spend their time on, their reserve time than be here and deal with some of the things they have to deal with here." I consider Alderman Robinson's statement during the December 13th meeting to be a degradation of those who have been called upon to serve. I've been a member of the National Guard since March 2016, 4 years prior to becoming a police officer with the City of Olean. The department hired me with a full understanding of my military obligations and has been more than supportive. On August 17, 2022, Chief Richardson was awarded the, quote, Patriot Award, unquote, by the Department of Defense under their Employer Support of Guard and Reserve program. I am currently forward deployed in support of USARP-UR-AF, Operation European Assure, Deter, and Reinforce, which I was ordered to participate in as a direct response to the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. My duty and service to my country during this tumultuous period is one which I consider to be an honor. However, my being deployed has also been extremely stressful for my family and me. My wife is currently carrying our first child. Without my physical presence to assist her in the daily challenges that pregnancy presents, our separation, due to my duties, has carried its own set of challenges, both emotional and mental. I would be remiss to fail to mention that I expect Alderman Robinson, being a former member of the Armed Forces of the United States, to understand the stresses and challenges that a family experiences with one of their own is deployed. His comments during the December 13th meeting disappoint my expectations. At no point did Alderman Robinson contact me prior to making this statement regarding his opinion on my alleged preference of military service over employment with the Olean Police Department. 2 Olean police officers are indeed currently forward deployed. As one of those 2, I consider Alderman Robinson's comments insinuating that military members have a choice to deploy as a welcome respite from the duties of service to the City of
Respite, by the way. Yeah, just
Olean, inflammatory and contrary to a culture of support that should be in place for reserve component service members. I believe it is imperative that our elected officials support all members of our municipal staff and strive to achieve an environment that is collaborative. I humbly urge all elected officials who have the privilege to be present with their loved ones this holiday season to remember that there are those who do not have this luxury. I'd like to thank the Mayor and the Common Council of the City of Olean, as well as any residents of the city present during this reading for their time. I wish you all a safe holiday season. Very respectfully signed, Dylan Ensel.
So I don't think I know Dylan. I know a few of our officers, and I know there's a pile of new ones, and we've got a bunch of ones that just retired, and you know what I mean? You're just going to have more. But, so actually I should probably, I guess, let it play then, right?
Okay, thank you. Next up, we've got miscellaneous communications.
None.
City official reports,
None.
proposed legislation and referrals.
PL number 127.
So, all right.
There was a letter from both of you, so I truly appreciate your time.
All right,
and
so
your
they're
service,
sending
and,
off
look forward to the
Pauly G.
institutional memory that gets
and
lost
Linda
when
Witt.
people with this
What?
amount of time leave any board is significant. So,
But then there's a comment
I
here
appreciate your service. And I
about why another letter is not being read, which, I mean, it's communications to the mayor. So somebody writes the mayor a letter, and he chooses to have it read, and essentially it was read by the city clerk, who's the appointee of the mayor and, is one of the subordinates of the mayor, and essentially all the mouthpiecing portions, like this is a proclamation from the mayor. The city clerk reads it. That's just what it is. It's the hand, it's the hand that accepts money and puts it and accounts for it, receiving money for the city, as well as doing clerical stuff like reading and conducting the more like, the secretary of the board type stuff at these meetings. Now, obviously, it's not the person who's, dictating notes and all those other things, not being the stenographer for the meeting, but that's what the city clerk's job is. And, when the mayor's like, I have a letter I received, and they're like, clerk, read the letter. And that's kind of his job. He's the mouthpiece, right? But it's humorous that.
Another thing, because along with that letter, that same day or the next day, there was a letter from Jason Clemens who had asked to have it read. I didn't know if we were going to read that one also.
Jason Clemens is here.
Jason, oh, hi Jason, I did see you come in. Well, good, then you can read it yourself. Perfect. Thanks.
Which we'll find out that that's just kind of like an unintended kiss off, right? Because like he didn't want to read his letter. He wanted to read something else. But that was humorous. And then coming right up to the next, I have a note here.
Yeah, please, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. On the agenda tonight is the vote again for my disapproval of the local law for Surveyor Review Board. I've been accused of a lot of things here, and I just want everyone to know that as I received one email today that said I should listen to the people of Olean. That I did. When that was passed by the Common Council, I had, at that particular time, I had no intentions of disapproving it. Okay. The next day, and even that night, I took a couple of phone calls. The next day, I took phone calls. I saw people, and they asked me to, and there was to veto that legislation. It wasn't needed at Olean. So I followed the procedure there was for the local law. According to New York State, I had 30 days to disapprove that piece of legislation. So I took comments in that time from many, many people in the city of Olean. The night of the public hearing, I believe there was maybe 14 to 16 people here that, and several of them gave comment, okay? But, when I took an oath, I took my oath for the city of Olean here, and in that oath, I said I would represent all the people of the city of Olean. So nowhere in that oath it has said you're only to listen to the ones who come to a meeting and give comment. So I did my due diligence. I listened to the people, and there was probably of the ones that were here that gave comment in favor of the Surveyor Review Board. There was many, many more that was not in favor of it. And even after it came out that I gave my disapproval of the law, then there was even more people that approached me and said they were happy that I did that. So I did what a lot of you aldermen have said. You listen to your constituents, and that's why I disapproved the law. And now we're at this point here where it's up to the Common Council to override if they wish, or to not override that disapproval. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will the clerk please read the public comment statement?
The public comment portion of the Common Council.
Name and address, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
So they start the public comment here. All right. So obviously, just to recap, obviously the mayor kind of just gave you a quick synopsis on why he disapproved it and blah blah blah. And and a lot of people throw out the term like the silent majority. But here's the issue: is that a lot of people like, when I went over this in a previous podcast about something being your problem, right? If you show up to speak here, it's your problem. because it's something that eats at you. It's something that bugs you. It's something that eats at you and you don't do anything about it. You don't come to these meetings. You don't have your own podcast and talk about the things that bug you. Then you are letting other people, you are donating your power to handle your own problems to other people. And then you cannot bitch about the results that happen. But there are people out there that, don't want to be vilified. They don't want to put themselves in a public forum where they can be like, that guy's a Nazi, that guy's this, that guy's that. They don't want to do that. So they call their elected official and say, hey, listen, you're my representative. I want you. This is my thoughts. My thought is that I don't want a CRB. And you get a whole bunch of people that call the mayor. And he says, well, listen, I'm getting 100 phone calls. And then for every one person who's really, really loud at a podium in public, I'm getting 100 phone calls. Like, what weighs more? Don't they all weigh the same? So then, like, if you're weighing 100 votes this way and one, that's what the silent majority are. It's the people that speak to you. That's the people that speak by voting. That's the other thing, too. Like, you don't like something, you can make yourself vocal. But the real way to it is to vote people in or out of office. And when you vote somebody into office, you're saying this person has the power to vote on my behalf, to make decisions on my behalf in government, because they can't have every person being, you know what I mean? Like, we can't have a referendum on every single little issue, because then nothing would get done. We'd have no budgets passed. You know what I mean? So you have to, like, you send a smaller group of people to do the decision making for you, and the person making the decisions, you voted for them. So at that point, you've given your if you didn't like the way that they did it, you pick somebody else or run yourself. That's how it works. So, anyways, continuing on for our first public comment speaker, which...
No time to take off my jacket, I guess. Good evening. Pabst Genesis 309 North 5th Street. Forgive me if I'm a little slow and my volume is a little low, but some people in this room might be happy that my volume is lower than usual tonight, but I slipped and fell on the ice a week and a half ago, and I'm still in incredible pain. Please deal with me. When the topic of the Police Civilian Review Board came before the council, I urged that it not be approved because I felt that it was toothless, and I felt that it would have no real effect other than to be a handy tool to cover up corruption and abuse within the Olean Police Department leadership. Well, now Mayor Alio has proved me wrong beyond measure. He's decided that he is no longer going to pretend that there is any accountability in the Olean Police Department. A former police officer joined his comrades behind the big blue wall of silence to shield the few wrongdoers that we have on our police force out of some, I don't know whether it's misguided loyalty or something more nefarious. I'd like to think it's misguided loyalty. So now the police know that there will be nobody looking over their shoulder, nobody holding any of them to account.
What are our cops doing that is so egregious that brings these allegations forward? Like, there's a couple rotten apples in the bin. Like, what rotten apples? Like, oh, well, we don't have names for them, right? Like, oh, it's all ambiguous, right? Like, well, but like they're not out there like snuffing out minorities and people in the LGBTQ community. Like, oh, we just found like 4 more gay people down by the bridge, like zip tied around their neck and like just left for dead. Like, no, that's not happening. That's not happening. But it's like, oh, the cops are just out there just like, just nightsticking minorities. Like, it's not happening. So then, like, oh, but they're out there we're just shielding the bad apples. Like the one guy that's doing, but that's Jeff. Come on. Jeff was hit in the head with a shovel during a domestic, and, now he just, beats up minorities with his nightstick, and, like, we just look the other way. Like, no! First off, I don't even know, there might, I think we might have, like, 1 or 2 cops named Jeff, so they're just using Jeff as just a generic name, right? Like, Bill's doing it. Shirley, the cop, is just out there nightsticking minorities, right? Like, we're not covering up Like, there's nobody covering up anything, right? Like, when something happens, it goes through a process, right? Like, they go for, and we'll get into that with one of the comments. Like, there's, I think one of the speakers actually against the CRB will talk about how, like, an incident happens and, like, an alderman made a stink about it, and then it's like, there's drug test, there's this, there's that, there's this, and they were all going through it. They just don't make it public. Yeah, I mean, if the paper inquired about it, which they don't, but then there's, like, it's an investigation still. Like, if an officer is accused of wrongdoing, like, you don't just be like, oh, we're going to show you every bit of the investigation. It's like, no, like, investigations are usually, like, kept close to the vest on both sides, the defense and the prosecution, right? Like, you keep both sides close to the vest. You know what I mean? They you can get discovery and they could share and whatever, but, like, for the most part, like, there's some of this stuff is pretty sensitive up until trial. So, I mean, or if there's even going to be a trial brought forth, right? And then let's like some of it is, like, if somebody comes along and accuses a cop of doing something, right? And, like, nope, we need the cops, we need his bank records, we need all this stuff. Well, okay, no, transparency, let's push it all forward, right? Like, oh, the cop was exonerated, but we're going to give you all his bank records, his tax returns, his home address, where his wife works, what her name is, what grade his kids are in, their teachers, you know what I mean? Like, no, you don't do all that. Like, that's above and beyond, and that's doxing, right? Like, we don't do that. Like, there's a process, and it's handled, and it's not like there's just a bunch of, we don't want Sally to get lose her pension because, she just happened to, back over somebody and blah, 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 and we're just going to sweep that under the rug and, like, the old lady will be fine. Like, that stuff doesn't happen, right? Like, there's proper channels, like, just like you or I, and it goes through, right? So, anyways.
Whether it is harassing victims of hate crimes when they try to protect their home with a fence.
I need to go back 30 seconds for that one. Nothing will be done, right?
So now the police know that there will be nobody looking over their shoulder. Nobody holding any of them to account. Whether it is harassing victims of hate crimes when they try to protect their home with a fence, or whether...
If you've watched any of the Common Council meetings in the last year, you would have seen this one. The lady has come up to the public comment and complained that code enforcement, she was unaware that she was not allowed to have a fence, and then they sent out the rules on the fence, and then she put it in the public right-of-way, which isn't, like, it's her property, but you're not allowed to do anything there without a DPW permit. And then, like, if it's a permanent, like, if you're going to take a tree out or you're going to, like, replace a sidewalk or whatever, you need a DPW permit. You got to call Dig Safely. You got to do all this stuff. And if you're going to put something there permanently, it's not really in the code office. It's kind of DPW because they're more, but it all has to come to the Common Council because they're the ones who have to give you permission because you essentially have an exclusive rental agreement with them, right? Like, you might own to the curb, but then, like, in perpetuity, you are like the landlord or the steward of that property that the city has exclusive use and control of, right? Like a tenant. Like, you can't just go into a tenant's house and be like, I know you rent from me, but I'm going to, like, sleep here today. You know what I mean? No, like, this is like, you're going to mow the lawn, you're going to shovel the sidewalk. That's you as the landlord, right? And the city can use it, like, right? Like, the tenants are the people in the community who walk on the sidewalks. The utility companies who do service for the city and have exclusive monopolies in the city to, pipe gas to your house, and electric lines that run overhead, and the poles for the electric lines, and, any other buried utilities, the water and sewer, things like that. It's just part of that little, like, it's the little sliver of, I don't know what you call it. Like, it's a sliver of communism, right? Like, this is for the community. You own it, but it's one of those things. It's like a deal, but everybody's got that's the rub. Everybody's got it, right? So, a lady puts a fence in the subway. It's more of like a codes DPW issue, not a police enforcement issue. But apparently, like, I guess the cops are driving by and, like, doing something to her. No, they're not. No, they're not. That's the rub. That's where they're getting you right here. They're like, oh, lady wanted to put a fence up. Damn cops. Like, the cops, that's codes is managed by the fire department. Like, DPW is a different union than the police officers. Like, there's no, like... Anyways, let's continue to the next one.
The misdeeds of elected officials within this city
What's a misdeed? I'd like to know what that is.
when they are caught openly and admittedly breaking the law on YouTube.
Openly and admittedly. I never admitted to breaking the law. I do things on YouTube, right? Like right here. Like I'm doing a thing, right? I'm doing a podcast on YouTube. And I don't believe I'm breaking the law. I mean, you show me the man, I'll show you the law he's breaking, right? Isn't that the old caveat there? So he's referencing me. Pab here, Pab Smollett. Anyways, yeah, he every time I turn around, I've done something to Pab. I could be sleeping. Meteors could be raining down from the sky, and apparently in my dream, I summoned the meteor gods and sent them flying down. And if anything ever bad happened, like in Louisiana, my great-great-aunt got hit by a meteor from Kevin's bad dream. Like, get him! Like, get over yourself. Anyways, but admittedly breaking the law. But when I did what he's accusing me of doing, he was like, he didn't say he was smoking pot on YouTube before it was legal, but I think it should be legal. I don't have a problem with any of that. But I don't like Kevin. And all of a sudden, it's Kevin was doing illicit drugs on the internet. Like, no. Get out of here. The company line, the company stance to this day is that we've never done anything illegal on the channel. We've smoked some West Green Street oregano on the channel, which may have brought some controversy to us, but never admittedly done anything illegal or unlawful. But anyways, I love how speculation and rumor can turn into fact. I was out there, admittedly, I'm in a court of law, like, the truth, you can't handle the truth. He's this guy.
Mayor Alio has once again said that there is no accountability. There should be no accountability.
He said
and he's no longer even going to pretend that Chief Richardson and the leadership of the Olean Police Department are subject to any kind of law.
That's right.
Thank you, Mr.
remember
Mayor.
him saying that in the meeting. He wrote a letter to the Common Council in the previous meeting and said, I'm vetoing this because I want to make sure our cops get away with whatever they want to. It's the right quote, I believe, right, Pab? I mean, it's out of the mouth of Pab.
Proving my few remaining shreds of faith in the human condition and proving me wrong in holding them. And showing us once again that for minorities, whether they are ethnic, religious, or orientation-based minorities, have no protection within this city, and there can be no justice in the city of Olean. When I was at St. Bonaventure, there was a student who was thrown through a plate glass window at what was then Olean's only, and as far as I know, through history, still only gay bar. Because he said the wrong thing to a trucker who breezed inside.
I've heard a similar story, by the way. When I was in high school, we talked about all the different bars that we could try to get into that probably wouldn't ID us. And Mixers, which I believe is who I know and am very good friends with, Jody and Mike, who used to own and operate that bar. I became friends with them afterwards because they were closed by the time I got out of high school and was legal drinking age. And on this channel, we don't admit to doing unlawful things. So, company policy, you know. Anyways, I met them years later, and they corroborated. There we go. There's the word. They corroborated a story that I had heard about mixers, about a guy coming in, finding out that it was a gay bar, said something, and the people that went to mixers were not like the stereotypical like pansy, right? Like that was the thing. Like this is the way that Jody had described it to me. Like we were fit guys, right? That we were strong, muscular men, right? So trucker comes in and says, "I don't want no," blah, blah, blah. And then apparently this guy was sent out on his ass. Now I don't know if he was sent through a plate glass window or if he took somebody with him through the plate glass window, but I know that some guy off the street came in, ran his mouth in there when he found out that he was in a gay bar, and got his ass handed to him. It's the only incident I've ever heard of at mixers. Now, given I wasn't at the scene at the time, I wasn't on the scene, the drinking scene at the time, because I was in high school, when I had heard this story, when we were talking about all the different bars that we could try to sneak into, right? Like, that's like all teenagers do, right? But I remember hearing that story. And I don't remember hearing about any homosexual men being thrown through a window. I remember a straight male who stumbled in there and then opened his mouth in the wrong company, getting his ass handed to him. So, I love how, like, you know. Oh, and P.S. Like, apparently, like, I hate gay people. Like, apparently, like, Pab always accuses me of that. And it's funny, like, in like roundabout ways he'll do it. He'll make posts on Facebook, and it's like, Kevin Doherty hates gay people. And it's like, if I hated gay people, I would not be friends with Jody and Mike. I would have disowned my mom and her wife. I wouldn't be walking my sister down the aisle this fall at her wedding. There's like a lot of things that like people that hate gay people and hate the LGBTQ people and like are just disrespectful monsters that like they don't do. And like everything that I do represents nothing that he describes that he accuses me of. Like, it's just, anyways, back to it. Luckily there's no more slights against me in this one.
Not many people are aware of that because it was hushed up pretty quickly, but we in the LGBT, very closeted students at Bonaventure at the time, knew it meant stay out of Olean.
Just imagining like 60.
We got the message loud and clear, and through his veto, Mayor Aleo has just thrown every minority citizen of this city through a virtual plate glass window.
Virtual plate glass window. Bill Aleo throwing all the minorities through it. If it's a virtual one, can we make it into a screensaver? Because I'd like to see what you're talking about. Thank you. All right. Anyways.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Oh boy, here's a fun one.
Hi, Tim Sherlock, here in Olean, South 18th Street. When I came last time, I spoke about wanting this to be passed, regardless of there being no teeth or whatnot, that it was a stepping stone, a step in the right direction. I've listened to both sides, arguments for and against. The only argument I've heard against originally was it was going to burden the taxpayers, which, let's be honest, was a fallacy, because we looked at very skewed data.
I'd like that. I made a note here, like fallacies. Mr. Sherlock uses the term fallacy quite often, actually, in a lot of his public comments, and I feel like people use words up here, and they have no meaning, right? Like, we looked at the skewed data. Like, first off, how do you know the data was skewed, and what data did you look at? Because I did not see anything released to the public. I mean, I didn't foil for it. I mean, a FOIL request is also foilable, so I could probably foil for everything that Mr. Sherlock foiled for. And they would give me a list of all the different FOIL requests that he had submitted to see if maybe he foiled for some kind of documentation, some projections that the city had accumulated, but I've never heard or seen. And I've been keeping a pretty close eye on the CRB thing, man, and I have not heard of anybody producing any kind of like projections or estimates related to what this is going to cost the taxpayers. I just remember people pointing out logical, obvious taxpayer expenses related to a CRB. And they were all apparently fallacies, according to Mr. Sherlock, and it was skewed. I don't know how it was skewed, and I don't know how it's a fallacy, and I don't know what data he's referring to, but I love how he like leads with that, making it seem like he's got this big, juicy T-bone steak of evidence to drop, and he just doesn't got nothing.
I have not heard at any of these meetings from the police department or the mayor, when asked, the rationale for not wanting it.
Oh, they've told
I'm
you.
not going to assume that our police department is bad, because I happen to know many of them and they're very good. But I also would not assume that they're all good. There's no such thing as perfect. Even among many of you, there's no such thing as perfect, or myself. We all get called to question in our life, whether we like it or not. It's how we answer that calling that will determine our character. We cannot brush things under the rug and hope that we don't see them. I will tell you, as a father of a 10-year-old, they like to push everything under the bed and say, my room is clean. But unless I pick up that bed sheet, I didn't know. We have an opportunity here to take a step forward, to look.
I'd like to point out, because I think he goes back to this reference, if there's police officers in our local community, in our county, maybe even on the division of the state troopers that are in our area, if they're taking like hiding bodies, right? Like the proverbial body, right? They've got bodies, skeletons in the closet, right? If they're hiding stuff under a bedsheet and then saying the force is clean, like you would know about it, because it's hard to hide a body. Like, this isn't Hollywood. Like, this isn't the beginning of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Like, we're not San Andreas. We're not, like, we don't have, Pulaski and Officer Tenpenny on the force, like, shooting cops, throwing them in the trunk of cars, fingerprinting, like, troubled youths from our area and being like, we got this gun with your fingerprints on it. Wait till they find it someday, do our bidding. Like, like, Hollywood makes it seem like that shit is so believable. And it's believable because humans can come up with that in their head, but it's not believable in execution. Have you ever done something in your life that, like, you thought you could get away with, like being a little kid and sneaking candy, and then eventually somebody finds the wrappers? You know what I mean? Like, nothing's, you know what I mean? Like the guy that's that they're bringing on trial for the murder of the college students, like, he's a criminal justice major. He's trying to follow that stupid Netflix movie with the, like, How to Get Away with Murder, or Murder, She Wrote, whatever the one a couple years ago that came out with the whole class full of people, and then the teacher ended up murdering somebody and bringing the whole class in on it. You know what? Those people, that's Hollywood. I feel like William Dafoe right now. Like, you know who does this? Hollywood. Regular cops don't do it because regular cops can't get away with it. Super cops can't get away with it. Like, it's not happening. Like, did one cop, like, is there a bad apple on the force? Maybe. And what's the worst they're getting away with, right? Like, 1 out of 50 cops, one of them is taking his lunch break and, like, makes it, like, it's a half an hour and he takes a whole hour, right? Like, or, you know what I mean? Like, there's corruption everywhere is true. That's a true fact, because but to what degree is it corruption? Like, you don't have cops out there, like, murdering people. You know what I mean? You have, like, somebody showed up 5 minutes late for work. Like, is the fact that they're not, like, making up for that, like, corruption because they're stealing 5 minutes from the taxpayer? Yes, but like, is that the corruption you're cracking down on? No, you're corrupt. I heard this recently, which was the demand for racism and corruption does not meet the supply. And that's a very true statement, because like there's all these people demanding, we need to get all the racists. It's like, no, we're changing the definition of what racist means so that everybody is considered a racist. And now we can bring the supply to meet the demand. They make it sound
at
like
the actions. If no wrongdoing ever happened, it would be a very boring board to have. But let's be honest, there is no such thing as no wrongdoing ever happening. And we owe it to our citizens, our taxpayers, to be able to ask those questions and have credible answers. And I can tell you tonight, not once have we been given an answer by the mayor as to anything that deals with conduct or the nature of the city. His comment is always, no comment. Until he reads or says something that's in favor of him. That's very telling.
It's very telling of every human being, Sherlock. Like, I don't know how obvious that is. No duh, Sherlock. Like, everybody skews and is biased in favor of them. And if there's something that you're going to say that's incriminating, no comment is a very good political move. Like, I'm not going to defend Bill's point, Mayor Bill, on like not incriminating himself. If he doesn't have the words formulated to defend himself in a certain, no comment is better than opening your mouth and saying something wrong. There's times that the public chooses to stay silent.
You have an opportunity tonight to carry through this law, which you already voted on once. To rescind your vote would be very telling of your character.
I don't know how.
And I do not find it questionable at all, though he would like to claim differently, that the mayor did not have this planned. It seems very strategic.
I'm sure he had it planned from the get-go. The CRB, because he's gotten mass amounts of phone calls. I was on the civilian review, the CRB, the police reform committee, and there was tons of people on there that were like, we don't need one of those. That sounds nonsense. And people were like, we need to overthrow the police department. We need one of those. Like, well, you just said it. Like, there's people in those meetings talking about overthrowing the police department, and we need to overthrow the police department, overthrow the regime, take over. It's like, you're using it to undermine the structure of the system we already have. Like, what? How do you not, like, how does this not? But now it's like, what's what the people want? Like, if the people want revolution, then revolt in a different way. Don't, like, create cancer in the system. Overthrow the system then. I don't care. Like, but don't do it this way.
To our mayor. The one thing we do have a problem with in this city is the powers that be. And we have an opportunity to change that. Even if it is a baby step, it is still a step. And once you get a stone moving, it is hard to stop that stone. That's called progress. I hope you think about that when you vote tonight.
Not all progress is good, by the way. Just saying that. That's why there's always push, take, give, and push. So this kid.
Hello everyone, I am Max Garvin, a resident of East Olean for 19 years. I wanted to briefly express my outrage concerning the Police Citizen Review Board becoming vetoed as of late. I do not comprehend how creating positive communication between the citizens of Olean and the police department is to be a negative for our city.
Because you didn't read what the CRB is for. You've only been listening to what it's on. The law was published on the city website. If nobody read that, then, like, you guys can't sit here and be like, I can't understand how positive communication, like, it doesn't talk about positive communication. It says we get complaints and we hang officers. Like, that's damn near what it says. But, like, now someone will take that and be like, oh, I'm against it because Kevin said this on YouTube. Like, I'm still not the go-to on the law. Like, I can actually I could probably pull it up, put it in front of me, review it on here. And I give you my take on it. that still shouldn't be like the end all be all for you guys and wanting to, want it or not want it. But it definitely isn't a transparency creating thing. It's literally a way for people to cry wolf to the city and try to accuse officers of things that they didn't do. And if they did do them, there's already channels in place to eliminate that kind of bad blood. So I'm, it's just another way to just re-scrutinize something. I listened to a fellow voter myself recently, and he said, I can't believe that the CRB went through because spoiler alert. So he mentioned, he's like, well, why don't we just have a CRB for the fire department? Why don't we have a CRB for other city employees? Why don't we have a CRB for elected officials? Let's have a CRB for local business owners. Let's have a CRB for, people in different neighborhoods. Like you could just knit grit down to everything. Like, why don't we just now it's starting to sound like he didn't say this part, but that whole description would be fine, except for the fact that it's starting to if you're going to do it for one category, I can't see why you wouldn't expand it for all categories. And if you start doing that, you start sounding like the censorship board of China. And we all know how much China loves America. So.
City, except for the 3 years I was in the Army, and I currently reside in Ward 1 in Alderman Woods Ward. I guess I'm confused by a few things, especially after watching the last council meeting. It was stated that one of the objectives of the civilian review
I did
board
not
was
steal
to
his
foster
shirt, by the way,
communication
just
between the
pointing that
police
out.
and
I
the
happen to,
public.
this is from my own
I'm assuming
arsenal.
that goal of this communication is meant to improve your police department. However, it was claimed that one of the proponents of this fostering of communication had notes from way back about having information about there being bad culture and management issues within the police department. I'm curious if these issues were ever addressed with the mayor or the chief of police in an effort to actually improve the department before these issues were addressed publicly in a council meeting where it could be deemed politically advantageous. I don't know when the Olean Police Department became the bad guys. I really don't. Aldermen have stated in public meetings that if the police don't like the Civilian Review Board, they can move to another state. I believe Florida was mentioned. It's also been stated that the only way for your officers to make more money is to go to the county or the state. It was also publicly stated that your officers shouldn't make as much money as the county or the state officers. What on earth is this based on?
Aha.
Call volume?
On alcohol itself.
Qualifications? Is this really the way that the council feels is the best way to improve your department? Is this the best way to recruit new officers to come to this department? Or, just as importantly, the best way to retain the officers that the department already has? Regarding tonight's vote, I feel that some members of the community want this board. I do. But I also believe that the majority of the public does not feel that the city needs a civilian review board. And I think some of you aldermen know this. I'm curious how many of you have reached out to the chief or the mayor to see how many complaints are made against our officers, and more importantly, how many are substantiated. I know that you were all offered publicly in a council meeting to watch body cam footage of an officer being exonerated from an allegation made against him. The city pays the mayor and the chief of police good money to do their jobs. By instituting this board, you send a clear message to them that you don't trust them to do the right thing. I'm not asking you to vote with your heart tonight, as you were for the first vote. I'm asking you to remove emotion from your decision and do the right thing for your city. Please vote against this board tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Daniel Gayton,
So,
794 North Union Street.
Marzi brings up a lot of good points there. I recommend you rewatch that to let some of that soak in. Danny, I put a note here, I'll wait for him to start talking and then I'll make my comment.
Be back here about this topic again. Thought we were over this, but here I am. So, I don't know. I can help answer some of your questions coming from the police department. The Citizens Review Board was never meant to be a us versus them situation. You guys made it an us versus them situation.
I put you're a joke. Yeah, let that sink in. Because who is us, who is them, right? Like, is us me? I'm not a cop. Is them a cop? Is them you? is us. You like this is where like we start getting into some philosophy stuff. Like, years ago, I did like a family genealogy thing for my siblings before my grandparents had passed, and I think we ended up determining that like my brother and sister and I were 45% German, roughly 45% Irish. Like there was like 2% French Canadian or something like that. Like, and it's one of those things. Like I don't go around telling people that like I'm a French Canadian, right? Like if one of my mom used to say that that we were Jewish, and I always thought that was kind of weird, right? Like she used to say that we were Jewish, and in the German side of her family, her mother's mother was a practicing Jew, and she was, I think her last name was like Rosenberg or something, and if you follow the Jewish religion, like it travels down the mother's side. So she was a practicing, if she was a practicing Jew, then like her daughter would get it because it follows. It almost becomes genetic, right? So they believe that the mother is the hearth of the home. So none of my kids would be Jewish because I'm a male and I'm the first male to break that cycle. But my sister's kids would follow that according to the diktats of the Jewish religion. But I don't like go around telling everybody that like I'm Jewish because I'm not a practicing Jewish person. But according to the rules of Judaism, I would still qualify. Like if I said, you know what, I'm gonna, give my life to, to Yahweh and follow the Torah and start going to Shabbat and to synagogue and to temple, then I would and I'd start practicing the Sabbath like that. Then there should be no reason why, that I couldn't convert. But I'm not like my kids would be non-Jews according to the religion because it has to come down the mother's side, right? So like it came down my mother's side, but now I'm a male, so it would not come through me, right? So, but I don't go around telling people that I'm Jewish. Now we did do June-ish one time, so there's gonna be some critics out there like you're pretending to be Jewish. Like no, I was trying Judaism out for a month. I wanted people to take perspective in different people's lifestyles and rules, and that's a completely different thing than telling people that you are like Jewish, always Jewish, things like that, right? But like all the time I'm like, if me and Danny got in an argument, all of a sudden I would be called a racist because Danny promotes the fact that he's an African-American man, right? And like Jay Clemens, who's going to come up, and all these other people, and it's like at which percentage, like your great grandfather was, you know what I mean? I don't know Danny's makeup. I know his kids. Like you couldn't point him out of a lineup from white people and tell, you know what I mean? Like you could like indistinguishable, right? Like so it's like they could be European. You know what I mean? Like, but I don't care about shit like that. But every time somebody speaks out in the public, they make it sound like I've been living my life, like breathing down people's throats about like what race they are and their ethnicity. Like, it's important to know where you come from to a certain degree. You know what I mean? But like, not all of us live our lives giving a shit what other people's makeups are. And like to say that like if I'm not living my life that way, then I'm not discriminating against you. There's very few people anymore that do that. They're actually trying to drum people up to do that more. What, last year Sesame Street started telling you that it's not what's inside that counts, it's what's on the outside that matters because that's how people will judge you. Like bullshit. That's not what people do. That's not what people have been doing for the last 50 years. Get out of here. There's some people, you go to Shingle House, right? Like the middle of nowhere, like where some of those people haven't left their farms in like 50 years. They still think the Civil War is going on in some places in this country, but like, you know what I mean? Like that, this isn't The Adventures of Huck Finn. It's ridiculous that like everybody can claim racism, right? Like, I could claim that people are discriminating against me because of the 2% French Canadian I am. Or that somebody watched this podcast and found out I was Jewish and then hate crimed me, which will, there's a funny little, like, I'm the daughter of the man who was hate crimed. Like making verbs now. Like, it's just dumb. Like, they fired a girl on ESPN for that. Like, she was like, yeah, like Barack Obama promoted the fact that he was black, and it's like, but he was 50%, and he was raised by his white parent because he never met the other parent. And then she pointed out that she's like, but I was in a similar boat, and I don't go around telling people I'm black. I tell people I'm white, just as much as I am black. I am who I am. You don't go around telling people. You know what I mean? Like, that's. But they fired her for that because she didn't like embrace this victim narrative that apparently exists. Go figure, right? Like,
That's never what it was meant to be. That's never how it was laid out.
because it's not.
Even the letter
You're
that was read
introducing
tonight
this us
was
versus
more of
them
a us
narrative
versus
because
them
it didn't
situation.
exist before.
Nobody.
You guys came
nobody
after
up
the
here,
police, so
nobody
if you want to say
that
that's
wanted
them.
the Citizens Review Board ever claimed that it was a citizens versus police situation.
There it is.
was a way to open up communication. I can
Communication
tell
has
you
always been there.
that coming from a minority community, the reason that you don't have complaints is because we don't trust you. It's that simple. And when I say minority community, I can tell you, people look at skin color and call it minority. I'm talking LGBT community don't trust you either. I work with the mental health and disabilities. They don't trust you either. This is why you don't have complaints. This is why you don't have anything working, because they don't trust you.
Yes, now the disabled have come out against the police department. News in, people. Watch out.
It's that simple. This isn't a hard thing to figure out.
You're a joke.
You have a citizens review board with that.
Oh, I made a note here. Sorry. Population decrease. I wrote that word, but actually I'd like to know what his job is, because he says he works with the disabled, yet he says he tears apart when I was on the council. He came to us and said, I tear apart budgets for a living. And I'm thinking, like, you work with the disabled or you tear apart budgets? Like, there's not too many, like, forensics accountants that are also moonlighting as, like, home health care aides and people that also work at the rehab center or wherever your position is where you're helping the disabled. You also happen to be, like, moonlighting as a forensics accountant. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see it.
Absolutely no power. So what is the problem? So Alderman Robinson read a couple statements in the last meeting. I've been watching this thing from afar. I haven't been here, just been watching. And all of a sudden he gets attacked. Makes it us versus them thing, right? Not exactly what he was trying to lay out. What you guys from council should have took out of that meeting, because what I took out of that meeting after I watched it was, one, why are we at the second time that anonymous comments are allowed to be overridden by people who have to stand up here and tell you where we live? Maybe you guys should open up a little investigation on that. Maybe it's the we in the thee.
Maybe. Or you can write the mayor a letter and say, hey, listen, here's my letter. I don't want you to read it. I want you to know my thoughts and speak on my behalf as a constituent. And you get 100 of those letters. And maybe some of them are anonymous. I mean, you should disregard those. They should hold less weight. But you also have people that are afraid that if they write a letter, that the mayor will then explain, release your address and then you'll be vilified. Now, if you choose to take this forum where you are standing, then yes, there are rules. And those rules are you have to state your name and address. You write a letter, you don't have to state a name and address. Because the mayor weighs certain letters over public comment, that's on him. Vote in somebody who has a different mechanism for how they regulate what advice they take and what things from the public that they deemed should have more weight over others. But that's a personal decision. take that up with his character and him, and instead of just, like, that's, you have the choice of doing that too in your own life. Like, well, I always listen to my brother-in-law, and I have 20 other people that talk to me about stuff, and they, my brother-in-law is this and that, and he's maybe not the best character reference in the world, and then the 100 other people, and you weigh him more than them. That's on you and your decision-making skills. That has nothing to do with, like, what the best decision is.
Maybe there's a couple people that may be big donors or something like that are making these phone calls and making these calls. So what you should be asking yourself is, who's really running this city? Is it you or is it them? That should be the question.
Oh, yeah, it's corruption. Let's all go back to watching Daredevil on Netflix, which was a good show. But the big bald guy, I forget his name. He's not, it's not, like, this is Hollywood.
And when somebody brings up some concerns about a certain department within the city, them concerns should be taken serious. And maybe somebody should look into them. Archfeller's right. Maybe somebody should look into that. Maybe somebody should figure out whether or not the leadership within the city that we pay taxes in is adequate for the residents of the city. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But to sit here and point fingers at each other and not get down to the nitty-gritty of what's really going on is a problem. So instead of attacking people, why don't we figure out what the real problem is? This Citizens Review Board is needed. It's time for you guys to get with the times and move forward. You're operating as if this thing was 1977, and that's not the way that we're operating around here anymore. It's not the way that we should be operating around here anymore. Times are changing. And you either are going to change with them, or you're going to continually watch the population of this city decrease as it has over the past years and years and years. Listen, we haven't had a population increase in years. And it has not, and maybe it has a little bit to do with jobs, but it has a lot to do with culture. And if you don't believe that, go back to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee survey results that came out that still have yet.
All right, first off, the population decrease does have to do with jobs. It does. It's not culture. Like I talked about in the police advisory committee or whatever they called it from the state. There's not people here scaring and warding off minorities from coming here. And I mean, the city's always been trying to attract more people to it, right? But businesses are leaving because the state is like a damn vampire sucking tax dollars out to the point that, like, do you want to be sucked dry? Like, nobody wants to be sucked dry of their tax dollars, to clarify. So they don't build their businesses here. And if they have a business, they flee. And that's what happens. And then you lose jobs. And then the only people you can get to come here are people that are being released from county jail. They give them they give them $20 in cash, and they give them a bus ticket and say the DSS office is in Olean, and they send them down here. Like, that's what happens. Like, we get a big influx of people that are currently homeless, and they don't have a place, and they can get put up on the government dole, and we are like an Appalachian. We are like the tip of Appalachia, is what they call us, and it's like we're the poverty belt, and like we're at the tip of it, and we got 4 generations of welfare recipients, and like that doesn't promote good work ethic. It doesn't promote people to go get trade skills, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, we want to start a business there, but there's no trained candidates, nobody willing to be trained. And we're promoting more people. It's like a tumor. It's like it just keeps growing. Like, you have prosperity, they'll keep growing. There's bell curves to this stuff. Like, you could follow how job increases can increase a population in a community because you have more people working. More people working means more money. More money means that more people will give a shit about the houses that they're buying. There's more homeowners, and that means more people giving a shit about their home than renters, because renters don't typically give us crap, like, because in a few years they could be in a different rental, and they make it their home while they're there, but some of them don't even give a crap because they don't give a crap about the appearance of their face, and then they go out to work, or they go to work, they come home, they drink beer, they make a mess, they pass out, they wake up, they go back to work like they have a menial job, you know what I mean? But more people means better jobs, nicer places, good place to raise a family. They start to develop and give a shit. They don't just like It's less self-centered. It promotes more. That promotes culture, good culture. But yeah, if you build it, they will come. And it's not culture that you're building. And then he starts talking about the surveys. And I watched all those diversity and inclusion committees. Those surveys were very skewed on the questions they asked and where they were pumping the questions. Let's hit the farmers market up. Like I used to like sling coffee at the farmers market. Like, there's a lot of nice people down there, but a lot of people are very left leaning. They're like, there's, you get like, they believe everything that, oh, the police are bad? Oh, it must be true, right? They're like, screw the establishment. I grew up and I went to college, and college told me that the institutions were racist. And then you got guys like Danny here spouting off like, the survey results. Like, you handed survey results to a bunch of people that like are already eating out of your hand, and then you're like, look at all the survey results. Like, a bunch of left-leaning people. The people that are out working or right-leaning usually don't have time to fill out surveys because they're too busy. They don't go out of their way to fill out a survey. So it's humorous to me.
Thing to do with, because the Diversity and Inclusion Board was dissolved, along with the Police Reform Committee, that was anonymous comments again came from that pretty much stalled the progress in there. It's amazing.
Because people watched you guys in the police review committee, police reform committee. You guys watched me say things that weren't even remotely should be considered racist, and you watch people try to crucify me, and then other people saying lesser things than I getting crucified and just immediately resigning from that committee because they were getting threats to their home and all that other stuff. And then you wonder why people want to be anonymous. Like, but nobody is actually anonymously harassing you guys. Jesse Smollett.
Amazing how these anonymous comments just keep coming in. It amazes the hell out of me.
Because people are sheep.
But
people are scared.
They keep coming, so you got to ask yourself where they're coming from.
Pitchforks threatening to kill people over racism.
As a leader, you got to
We're
ask yourself.
going to kill people that are racist. Like, these people aren't racist. You're changing the definition.
Running this city. If these anonymous comments and these anonymous things keep coming in, is it a select few people that are really running the city? You guys, as a common council, should look into that. You have the power to look into that and say, show me who wrote it. Show me what they said. If they can't put it in writing, it never happened. Isn't that the common rule? If it's not in writing, it never happened, right? So here we are again. You guys voted this thing in once, right? Now, if you don't vote it in again, what are you telling the citizens of this community? Not only people look at the citizens here as minority citizens as if it's just skin color. You're telling the poor people of this community you don't give a damn about. You're telling them the people with developmental disabilities in this community you don't give a damn. You're telling the people with mental health you don't give a damn. You're telling the people that are in the LGBT community you don't give a damn. You're telling the minorities of skin color that you don't care. My cousin sitting here, Jason Clemens, still somebody wrote nigger on his car. Still don't know who that is. Is that by accident?
Getting down to like the 2% rule again, like the comment, like, somebody says the F word in a meeting, white people get told to stop. If he said the F word in multiple meetings, now he's dropping the N word. Like, I'm not allowed to say the N word. Like, 2 more generations and like, I like my kids would be just as black as his kids. You know what I mean? Like his grandkids. You know what I mean? It's like one of those, like, at what point though, like, it's just like, just dropping the N-word in the middle of a meeting, and then like the common council doesn't say shit about it. And that's, if I said shit at a meeting, they'd ask me to leave. Might even escort me out. He drops the N-word right in the middle of the meeting. That's just, it humors me. And then like, I don't know, like, and like, I'd have to look more into this whole like scenario of like, why would somebody write the N-word on Jason Clemens' car? If you'll see Jason in just a minute, but like, Jason Clemens is like, if you don't know, like, if you're not from Olean, you wouldn't know, like, the last name of Gayton or Clemens, like of being historically, like, the black families in Olean. And, like, because if you just met them and said, oh, my name's Jason Clemens, and blah, 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 and then you meet them, and, like, he's a little darker than I am. Like, you know, like, I have friends that are, like, 10% Italian that are, like, twice as dark as half of the people that are claiming to be black in this room. Like, that's the funny part. It's like, is it about skin color? Is it about that somebody in your lineage at one point was from Africa? Are we going to go back to Pangea? Like, what is the, like, and then, like, but like, who the hell would write the N-word on his car? Like, you would have to know him to be, like, that would be a personal slight against him. If you don't like that, if you don't like a person, like, you want to get to him, I guess that would work. But, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is, like, it's not like he was like, when you see, like, a black man, right? Like, that stereotypical guy on the street, like, and I don't like using that, but it's like that's like, you see Samuel L. Jackson, somebody writes N-word on his car, it's understandable because he's, like, it's black. Like, Jason Clemens could very well be, like, a very low percentage Italian guy because, like, you couldn't tell he's black. Like, that's the, like, I guess, like, isn't the purpose of it not lineage at this point? It's about, like, you can see it so it can be discriminated against. And if you can't see it, then how are you being discriminated? Like, I'm like, fill me in. Somebody. Like, well, somebody knew he was African American. Like, then that person was a douchebag, probably not a racist. Probably just did it because they knew, like, they didn't hate him because of the color of his skin. They hated him because of who he was, because there's definitely a lot more people that fit the bill of African American that you could have pinpointed and wrote that the word on their car. Like, this was clearly an attack against him as a person, not at the African American community. Like, it's just. Anyways.
Is that by accident? I had another cousin.
Yeah,
whether
by
it was
accident.
justified or unjustified.
I'm going to write the N-word on a car today.
We still don't know what the hell happened with that.
Oh, yeah.
By officer. Couldn't even get the information.
Oh, they're referring to a car tried to mow down a police officer. In his panic, he fired at the car, and then there was an investigation. They brought the state troopers in because our city wanted to have clean hands, right? They don't want to. We're not gonna review our own in a severe matter and accusations of this point. And he was exonerated. But go figure, right?
Even when we called to get the information, it all pointed back to the city that was holding it up.
It's an ongoing
But
investigation.
yet the city pointed fingers somewhere else.
Yeah, the state boys are handling the case.
This is why these things are needed.
All right, let's switch to the next one. I can't do this anymore.
In New York. I guess I'll take this opportunity to read my letter that I wrote to the mayor. I wished it was read by one of the council members so that I could have my other statement. Dear Mayor Elliott, technology. I'm writing to express my concerns on your recent veto of the Civilian Review Board legislation that was voted unanimously in a recent Common Council meeting. At the particular meeting, you had every opportunity to speak your mind just like every other council member. You chose not to. You waited till the last moment to make a statement behind closed doors as not to have to deal with any opposition. This, in my opinion, is exactly why we need transparency, not only in policing of the city, but also our politics. I 100% support our officers in uniform and regularly have great conversations with some of them when not on duty. I've had several since the start of this conversation about a review board. This conversation is not us against them, so I'm reiterating the same exact thing that a couple of citizens have already said. This conversation is not us against them dialogue. It's more of how can we together help with the fairness in policing. That is exactly what transparency is about. It's about open dialogue, so no one person feels like they've been unfairly treated by a person in power. Being a homeowner and a business owner in the city, I expect fairness. As a black man in this city and a victim of chronic racist acts my whole life, I can honestly say that that expectation of fairness.
Like, I don't
is
know
just
where
not
that
the
would be
same.
coming from, though. Like, you would have to know him and dislike him as a person to be like that. Like, and at that point, you lump those people not into racists but to douchebags. Like, it's like all white people must be racist because one white guy is an asshole out of 1,000, right? Like, one white guy is a racist, so all white people must be racist, right? Like, that's the same mentality. If one African American, one black guy out of 1,000 robbed a liquor store, do they all rob liquor stores? No. We've beaten to death stereotypes, and we say that they're not correct, and then, but you can use anything against white people because that's. Everybody can be racist against white people because they don't matter, right? That's the new terminology. Anyways, I don't not get along with Jason. Like, every time I've seen him, I had beers with him when we were playing darts. Like, I'm not like best friends with him, but I've never not gotten along with him. Like, had a few drinks with him. You know, it's one of those things. Like, I don't know. It's one of, like, I don't not get along with him. But it's one of those things. Like, I don't disagree with a lot of I don't disagree with him on a lot of points. I disagree with this whole, like, movement for the CRB. But, like, it's one of those things. Like, this push.
I'm sure being in your position as mayor and former police officer in the city that you do not want to see, that you do not feel and see the issue here. That is why for the first time in my adult life I spoke my mind at a common council meeting and read aloud for the same transparency and fairness the CRB is aiming to achieve. As long as you hold the position of mayor, I am on your side. I'm hoping that you are on mine. Feel free to respond and reach out to me so my words are not misunderstood. And I will give credit to Mr. Alio, Mayor Alio. He responded in kind, and I had a meeting with him this morning. It was a good meeting. We spent about 45 minutes or so.
See, and that's why I don't not get along with Jason. He's a good character, right? Like, he even says, like, hey, I'm going to give him credit. I wrote him a letter. These are how I see things. Like, I just don't think that some of the things that he sees are correct. And I don't know why people are targeting him. You know what I mean? Like, I don't chalk that up to racist, though. Like, some of the things that they're doing could be racist, right? Like, but I don't know. It's hard to kind of explain. I don't know. Maybe I'll touch on that more maybe later. But anyways, he reads his letter. He talks about things that happened to him. He gives Mayor compliments. Let's see here. Oh, this one's fun.
Leo Walters Tahara. For matters of personal safety, I'll give you my address privately, as I was assaulted within the past month for my orientation while walking my dog in my own neighborhood.
So, I talked to 4 people that saw this video, and I have not found it yet. And because I'd love to open up that story. I was assaulted in the last month in my own neighborhood. Apparently, Leo has a little dog that, like, was pissing or crapping on somebody's yard, and the person said, and you could barely hear it in the video, was, "Get your faggy dog off my yard." Like, wasn't even directed, like, because they used the F word, right? Like, just because they said that, it automatically went against the person. That's what I heard from like 4 different people, and the video's, blocked from this guy because, my videos are all public, but so anyways, assaulted. Yeah. New York does not have assault, where most places are assault and battery. Assault is the threatening of a punch. Like, he was threatening to punch me. That's assault. Battery is where you, like assault and battery is like the motion of like, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you, and then they beat the shit out of you, right? Like that's the assault and battery part. In New York, it's just assault, one category. So both of them is. I did some research into that too because I thought this claim was a bit absurd. So it's physical harm. Like harassment is to yell at somebody, stereotype them as a certain gender, and be like, you need to get off my yard, F word, blah, 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 blah. You know, that's harassment at best. If you can find somebody who wants to enforce, you know what I mean? Like a lot of times that stuff is like, yeah. So.
To talk about the recent veto of the Civilian Review Board for the City Police. You claim it was a mistake, which is unequivocally false, according to data from the top down in our country, starting with the Department of Justice. And it's a complete lie based upon your own words previously stated before. It's beyond infuriating that you continue to pander to an unidentified and ambiguous silent majority, and you have obvious skin in this game as a former police department. And moreover, you have a total disregard for minority community members who have been assaulted and victims of crime in your community, and that's never been rectified.
Assaulted. Just clarifying. Just assaulted. Never been rectified, by the way. We've just beaten up minorities and leaving them, just forgetting about them, right? Like, no, that stuff's not happening.
Moreover, what is there to lose for the city of Olean by guaranteeing the finest in policing, encompassing aspects of transparency and accountability via a board, especially if the police have nothing to hide? If there's nothing to hide, then that's great. We're not using unnecessary resources to talk about these things. Furthermore, I have a significant amount of problem with politicians that have a complete lack of personal integrity, as you've previously gone on the record saying that this was a good idea for our community. And now, shortly after that law was passed, in this mysterious window right before a holiday, where the only public...
Right, by the way, the mayor explained the window in which he could act to veto this, and the Common Council had dragged it up to this point. So unless Leo's pointing out a conspiracy in which, like, the Common Council, like, dragged it on to have it completed on this day, knowing that Bill would veto it within the parameters.
Comment is between two holidays where most people are out of town. Now we're vetoing this. Law. The CRB, which you now claim to be a mistake, was unanimously passed by a bipartisan council. I've been to a lot of these meetings, and I can think of not that many things that were unanimously passed that were contested. This was unanimously passed by a bipartisan council. Are we supposed to compromise? Are we supposed to be democratic? Or are we just supposed to let things happen behind closed doors on our tax dollars? This isn't a democracy. That's blatant politicking and playing games with the safety of vulnerable residents within the Olean city limits. If you truly care about building unity in Olean, a police review board is a fitting treatment, as it is statistically proven to enhance relations between community members.
I would like the statistics. I've yet to see anybody give me solid data other than emotionally invoking speeches at Common Council meetings. Give me the numbers, one way or the other, because from the discussions, the emotions, the logic, everything that everyone's brought forward, I'm tending to lean that the CRB is going to do more harm than good, because no one's bringing forth the statistically proven. If it wasn't true, your eyes would bleed. Like, what? Like, that's, like, it's so true that nothing could be truer. Like, what does that mean? Statistically proven.
And police officers. I firmly believe that the city of Olean has nothing to lose and everything to gain by creating a civilian review board. The fact that this law was bipartisan, written, and unanimously voted on shows that this isn't a political issue, but rather a personal one. I strongly urge you, Mayor, and all of you committee members, to think about these things when we talk about a civilian review board going forward. And I encourage you to not just think about the people who look, act, dress, and believe like yourself, but perhaps those who, by virtue of their own state in life, might not have access to the resources that you have. The research is there. The evidence is there. And your citizens are standing up, not being silent. We're a very loud group of people that are standing up and saying, hi, over here, something's on fire. Can we put it out? Instead, it's like, maybe not. That's not going to grow our community. That's not going to make us into the Olean that we can be. It's going to fall short. And I think this town is too great for us to let it fall. We have a beautiful community full of diverse and passionate individuals. We live in an area full of resources, and as much as I never wanted to come back to rural Western New York, here I am, and I like it, and I'd like to stay and be able to walk my dog without being called a fag. I think that'd be something that we should work towards. That's all I have to say, but in light of the fact that this was snuck in under the last minute on in the holiday when people can't come, I have a list of 30 citizens who are willing to provide their name and address in support of a bipartisan civilian or police review board, and I'm happy to pass them out. I believe I have 8 copies, so they're there for you. You might want to check in with the people in your constituencies because there is support for this. We can be better, but we have to do it together, and the games have to stop.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
Games do need to stop. Anyways.
Christine Sherlock, Genesee Street, Ward 1. This is my first time, so hopefully I can keep it within the 5 minutes. I generally don't speak in public, especially given where I work. So I just want to express first that everything I say here after are my words and my words alone. I do not represent the city nor my union. I'm here to basically give a couple of my 2 cents on a couple different things tonight. First being the Civilian Review Board. I'm not here in an attempt to change anyone's mind. At this point, it's pretty futile to do so. I'm not even...
That's correct. Way to read the room, because like they're definitely not going to change their mind. They voted unanimously for it. The mayor vetoed it. They're probably going to vote unanimously against it. Obviously, I'm not going to try to spoil any more for you, but yeah.
I'm here to speak out against the idea of what the CRB is supposed to be, but to speak against the way in which it's being executed. To me, the CRB is meant to be a tool for both the community and the police, a way in which residents are able to voice a complaint if they aren't comfortable with the multiple options they already have. To have their complaint heard, reviewed, and investigated among the proper channels, a way to work to and establish a resolution as a team. But this has become anything but a compromising joint effort. The idea of the CRB has been tarnished repeatedly by personal agendas and selfish goals, with statements being made over the course of this legislation that are at best partial truths, and that are indicative of dislike and discontent with the police on a personal level. Statements that are rarely, if ever, questioned, which have taken this proposed board from a really useful tool for the community and turning it into something reminiscent of the Salem witch trials with absolutely no questioning of anything that's said. It has gone so far as, on different occasions, in light of the review board, there has been a demand to see body cam footage on any complaints that have been voiced, only for it to be stated that reviewing such video is a complete waste of taxpayers' money when those complaints did not fit the agenda and were proven to be fake or unfounded. I'm really not sure how much more transparent you can get on the day-to-day policing other than watching in real time what's happening with the body cams, which they have on all the time. I've watched from a different viewpoint than most, as things have changed dramatically for the police department, more so over the past year. These people have been working with bare minimum staffing for months and over the year and summer. Between injuries, retirements, and transfers, and 2 deployments, which I was going to speak on, but I think Dylan Ensel spoke really well on that, so I don't really have much to add to it. We've lost people to other agencies, and we will be losing more over the next 2 months. Two or three of which are 3 of our most hardworking, most liked people. For pay and benefits, I would be lying if I said those weren't contributing factors. However, at the last meeting, to say that the actions of this council has nothing to do with it, quite honestly, is absurd in my opinion.
So I want to point that out. Yeah. I mean, a council that openly in meetings, we were I remember being on that board, the governor's, mandated appointed board. Like, we may withhold funding from your city if you don't have one of these boards. Like, I love how the former governor would just twerk us like that, But anyways, we used to be the highest paid police department this side of the state. We had the best officers. People would come from miles around to work for the OPD, and we had people starting their families here, and it was just there wasn't the corruption they're talking about and all this other stuff, right? There's still not the corruption they're talking about, but you're not getting, it's hard to find, like, people need to make money to live. And when you're paying police officers, like, the same pay rate that you pay the custodial staff, and these guys are risking their life, like, I don't know how you do it. Now, obviously, there was in the paper recently, they did a $5 an hour raise across the board for the police department. So, I mean, that's going to help. But, I mean, we're losing guys to the state troopers. We're losing guys to the sheriff's department. And the thought was, well, I mean, we're not paying them that because they could get the buyout. You know how many cops can't get the buyout? Can't get this little, like, this insurance buyout? Because they don't have a spouse that has better insurance. They don't have, like, you weigh the options. Like, I could go on the private market and get insurance, but I choose to take my employer's insurance because the insurance is way better. And if I take the buyout, like, I've got to stack that cash in an escrow account so that I don't screw up. Like, and at the end of the year, and it's a lot of extra, like, waiting and hoping and wishing. Like, at the end of the year, like, it's not worth it. And it's worth it for the city for people to take the buyout. So, the city saves like 50%. Plus their numbers drop. So, like, if you read the union contracts on any of these, like, the incentive for them people to take the buyout helps the city, even at the high dollar the buyout is. But to use that as a bargaining chip on why people aren't making, why cops were making like 22 an hour or something like that, to get shot at and to get their ribs broken in for like domestics and all sorts of stuff, like it's ridiculous. But we're losing cops left and right. And the Common Council, there's a few members on the Common Council, and one in particular that had mentioned that, and I think Marzi even referenced that too when he was up there speaking, that they need to, like, they can go to a different state. They can go somewhere else if they don't like the pay. Well, yeah, then guess what? You're scraping the bottom of the barrel. The cops that nobody, like, the cops that we have now are great, but you're going to have to be hunting for more cops, and other municipalities and agencies are paying way more. So when you start looking at the best candidates for jobs, like, why are they going to come down here to Olean when they can stay somewhere else and make more money? If you're a better cop. Because you're passionate about Olean? You want us to diversity hire from other places. You want us to hire from outside the city. You're not going to find people that are going to move to the city because of passion. Like, it's not a hardball situation. Like, I want to be a teacher in an inner city school to help underprivileged minority children. And, like, you don't get that all the time. That's very far and few between. A lot of people still need something that makes sense to feed their family. And maybe it makes sense at first, but then they need to start a family, and that's just how the ball bounces. And people are nuts to think otherwise. And if you want to, we had this argument when we were trying to raise the mayor's salary because we figured we don't want just retirees to run for mayor. We want people that are willing to step aside from their job for 4 years and put in the service, follow their calling to help their city. And so, yeah, sure, it might be a minor pay cut, but you're not going to go from $75,000 a year. The best and the brightest of Olean aren't making $50,000 a year. That's a 50% pay cut for those people. Not everybody's not everybody's Goodwill Hunting, right? Like, they're not sitting there like working their custodial jobs, also being geniuses, right? Like, you're getting retirees that just, I'll make $50,000 a year just to hang out, like run my city, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they have a calling, but they're not the best and the brightest. And no offense to any of our current or former mayors or mayoral candidates, but that's why a lot of, you get some that are just aldermen because they still have their full-time job because they can't stop feeding their kids. Look at the council president. Keep it with Goodwill Hunting talk. He's wicked smart, and can't afford to stop his doctorates and his professor, his professor job to come work for the city full time. We couldn't afford that. Well, we couldn't afford it budgeting for a $50,000 mayor. You're not going to get him. Put it at 75, you might consider taking a $20,000 cut. Because the mayor, according to the charter, if you ever read it, it's not designed to be a full-time mayor anyways. It's still considered a part-time mayor. So there is no rule on how many hours you have to work. So I'm just throwing that out there. Just like the alderman. I'd put in like 20 to 40 hours a week between phone calls and late night. And the missus will tell you, I got people that call me every week, 2 hours a pop, to talk about nonsense. And I'd talk them down from ledges, and I was their only friend, some of them. So, anyways, sorry, rant.
Imagine having a job that is overseen by a board of directors that are consistently calling you a liar, telling you you're bad at your job, you're corrupt, and you're hiding things maliciously.
Yep.
That you weren't worth as much money as your counterpart that is doing half the work that you are. Would you be happy there? Would your morale be very high?
Yeah, because she points out a good point there, too, is that the county boys, even though they're getting paid more, are also handling less calls. There's more of them handling less calls. And the state even less. Like, that's why they just kind of post themselves looking for problems, right? Like looking for speeders on the expressway.
In the last meeting, it was stated the OPD should not get the same pay as the county. I'm curious as to why that is. If both agencies are receiving a relatively equal amount of calls for service, how's OPD any different? Especially since the majority of the calls within the city of Olean that the county gets are actually dispatched directly to us. So that cuts their numbers very, very far down. If you're in the city and call 911 for a police emergency, this county is certainly not the ones that show up. These people, the ones who are consistently being put down and told they aren't worth it, are the ones answering the call. You don't have to like these people on a personal level, nor do they have to like you. But they're going to answer a call if you're the one making the call, every single time. It was mentioned previously also how the position for chief of police was handled when the previous chief retired. I'd be very interested to know who the someone is that applied for the position from outside the city. Given that the examined position were specifically internal as promotional, it was not canvassed out. It would not have been unless not a single applicant submitted interest from within. There were more than one person who was qualified for the position, one of whom was even interviewed prior to the current chief being appointed. Regardless, I'm unsure as to why that subject was even brought up, considering it was within the CRB, and that is really inconsequential to the legislation. There was also an issue mentioned last meeting that having the CRB in place would have assisted in an incident where a pedestrian was struck by a police vehicle.
That point actually there too also brings up a very good point, that I think that the general public needs to call their local civil service board. Maybe there needs to be a tutorial video on how civil service works. People clamored for transparency and government corruption, and they said and that's how civil service got created. They didn't want people to be overlooked, and they wanted to find the best candidate for the job. And what they actually do is they isolate good candidates that are not familiar with civil service law, but they might be the best candidate for the job. And you have to score in the top third, but you had to have taken the test, and they don't offer the test every day, and they've underfunded these divisions of civil service because it's an unfunded government mandate. So the federal government passes it down to the states, and the states dish it out to the counties, and the counties don't drop a lot of money into it. The city used to have its own civil service officer, somebody who would conduct tests and all these other things and help pinpoint it. Now we've left it to the county to do, and we still have the same amount of funding we did 50 years ago. So you don't have that many people, and they've got to review and hold all the tests, and then municipalities are creating new positions. You're creating diversity officers, and HR directors are at an all-time high, and you're creating all these positions, and the state puts down stricter mandates on who can be a police chief, who can be a fire captain, who can be a fire chief, all these different things. And then the general public doesn't know all these changes. It's the general public. It's damn near impossible to get any of these people. Nobody qualifies. Oh, you had to take the test. The test is held every 10 years. How are we going to find? So then, you don't have a provisional, and you get provisional appointments and all this other stuff. And then, and then COVID hit. I mean, they've been backlogged they were already on like a 2-year behind on provisional appointments, giving out extra tests and stuff. It's just humorous, it's just people don't know, and then they get mad like, well, why, we thought we were canvassing with new jobs outside the city. Like, well, not if there's qualified officers in the force, at which point they're considered they get a higher priority. So they get to apply from within. And if they don't get any candidates, then you go outside. But if you have candidates, then you interview those and you pick the best candidates out of that. And if you say, you know what, I still don't like those candidates, you know, then you can go outside of that. But we had qualified officers within that. And then their positions are resumed. And then you go and then you canvass, you know, for the entry level stuff, because everybody kind of shifts up the line. There's like a waiting period of promotions that kind of occurs over the next few months as people are filling the slots in on the ranks up the ladder, and then you're left at the bottom with the boots on the ground guys, the in the trenches, the foot soldiers, right? The patrol department. Those guys are left with a depleted staff because everybody moves up. You know, you get sergeants and captains and chiefs and whatever, and that's it. And then they put an advertisement out for that on the civil service tests, and they get applicants.
This brought into question policy regarding drug testing when involved in accident while on duty. I believe it was even inferred that a policy was generated because of this specific incident, which is false. There is, however, and has been, a designated section of the police contract for at least the last 10 to 15 years. So it's not something that actually occurred because of that. It's always been there.
An alderman accused an officer of running over a pedestrian, and a relative of that alderman, and stated that it, you know, like, oh, because I stirred the pot, they're making him do a piss test. Like, no, they're pointing out, like, it was like a big rumor now that we didn't have anything in our police force for that, and no, you just missed the protocol. Like, they're not going to disclose to you the piss tests or the results. Like, they're going to take their own action. And it's all on, like, above board, because if they didn't follow these policies and protocols, the Department of Justice would be breathing all over this city. You would see federal agents, you would see state boys all over the city if we were neglecting these allegations. Because you tell me that if somebody gets hit by a police officer and that family says, well, what happened, blah, 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 and there wasn't some sort of governmental mechanism. And by the way, the governmental mechanism, like, are we going to prosecute an officer for shooting at a car? That goes in front of a district attorney. And I believe because our district attorney, like for the one previously mentioned, has a working relationship with our police department, I'm sure they inferred it out to a nonpartisan other district attorney from a different area, different county. And they reviewed it and said there's no substantial evidence here, blah, blah, blah. And then they would not bring it in front of, so that's a different county, and they would not bring it in front of the court system. The court system is a state-run thing. So, like, we might have an Olean City Court, but they're actually all employees of the state. Let's get out of here. Like, that's people.
Can I finish, or just real quick? Okay. It's
Thank
literally
you.
two sentences. Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
No matter what these people are going through, what these people go through, no matter what they're accused of, they're still going to answer your calls because that's what they do. If you think that they like all the people that they go to across at Lincoln Park, that they're pulling out of the parks and dealing with on a daily basis, getting in on and off the meth buses, or the same people being Narcaned every single day, or anything like that they're doing, then you're honestly out of your minds. But they're answering those calls. They don't care who you are, what you look like. If they get a call for service and they're assigned to it, they are going. Are you going to like what they have to say? Not all the time. They're human. And they're not against having an open space for their people to be able to talk to them as well. But it needs to be handled in a much better way.
Thank you.
So she brought up some good points, and here's the doctor.
Gary Harvey, 408 East State Street.
Did he just say his name? He just put the doctor in front of it? My Lanta.
So first I would like to thank the picking and choosing of what gets read to the council when it's requested. So I'm glad that I sent it to all the aldermen. And apparently the decision whether or not it was going to be read was up to you, Mr. Crawford. And apparently,
John could have read it. Any of the other aldermen could have read it. They can choose what they want to read at a public meeting. They are not held at gunpoint unless, I mean, you're holding them at gunpoint to read your letter. I made a note here containing the F word and your letter. So, sorry.
Did not happen, so appreciate the picking and choosing. So I want to address a couple things that have been said. Number one, about the answering the calls. I don't know if anyone else has ever sat in an emergency room, waiting room, when a police officer brings an individual in under a state mandated 941, where they're required to stay until the medical staff essentially signs off and takes the exchange. But I guarantee that they don't care about everybody, unfortunately, because the attitude is, let me just dump and jump, oftentimes. In reference to the statement or the question as to, has anyone ever asked Chief Richardson? I have on more than one occasion watched him turn around and tell somebody, nope, and walk away from him when they were asked to speak with him. So that
I love how people, like, they remember what they want to remember, right? So, like, do you know what else was going on that day? Did he have another meeting? Was he supposed to give a presentation to the Common Council, and you asked him outside of one of these meetings to, like, negate his duty to serve, you know, like, there wasn't an active shooter situation going on. You know what I mean? Maybe there was. Maybe that's where he was going, and he couldn't talk to you at this time. Like, send him a letter. Set up an appointment. Don't just catch him. That's what happens is people catch these people out of the blue. They're like, hey, I know you're here to have dinner with your wife at this restaurant, but I want to talk to you about my problems with the city right this second. Like, hey, man, it's my anniversary with my wife. Let me eat. Like, I'll reach out to my secretary, schedule something, or here's my email, my phone number, text me, we'll schedule something, right? Like, people are so just arrogant.
Itself causes issues. We also have a mayor that publicly went on record and stated that he does not follow the city policies but handles things as he sees fit. That was prior to him being challenged with the Equity and Inclusion Committee before he threw a temper tantrum and dissolved said committee.
Emotional outbursts by Dr. Gary Harvey. Didn't throw a temper tantrum. I watched those meetings. Those meetings were pointless. There was a bunch of people having emotional breakdowns and outbursts, and it was like a kangaroo court, and they were trying to try people, and they didn't know, like, they just didn't know how to sit on a government board. Like, if you sit on a government board, there's certain ways things, and they didn't want to learn. Like, that's not how it should be. Let's change it. Like, then change the charter. Well, how do you do that? You put a referendum out to the mayor to change the charter, and then there's a study done, and it's like a 4 or 5 year process. You can't just go in and be like, well, I don't like it. I'm on this board, so we're changing it. Like, no, then they just dissolve the board because the board's trying to do things outside of its power, the scope of its power. You turn it into a coup to try to, like, just badmouth the mayor in front of his face. Like, come to a common council meeting and do that.
So here we have a circumstance in the situation where we can rattle off as many statistics as we want to, but clearly statistics don't matter. What matters is whatever political games that we're trying to play. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that individuals are willing to stand, whether for or against, whatever the topic may be, but they're willing to put themselves out there because they're passionate about it. Yet we have to hear again from the silent majority that only speaks to the mayor, apparently. I don't know. I'd like to know where they're coming from, personally. It's definitely interesting. It seems to happen every time something doesn't go his way, a silent majority sneaks up and shows up, and whether it was in reference to the Police Reform Committee or the Equity and Inclusion Committee, again, because we were challenging processes in the city and got told that we don't follow policies in the city anyway, so what's the point? So if that's coming from the mayor,
I watched those meetings. There were certain things we didn't have policies on, or they were so archaic you really couldn't follow some of them, and the mayor was like, you know what, we did it this way, and the way that he was doing it met the times anyways, but they were like, well, that's not the city policy. All right, then all he has to do is put out a memorandum on how the city's policy was. You guys were helping write policies? Like, those policies aren't diktats of the Common Council. Those are how the executive branch delegates. Like, he could throw every policy, all policies from this day forward are thrown out, and here's a new list of policies that will immediately replace them all. Every single one of them. If it wasn't replaced and it doesn't have a policy on it, ta-da. That's it. You could throw every policy out. The next policy is I will decide everything. I will decide how we'll go through it. Anytime there's an issue, come to me. I'll give you the policy. I'll give you for that particular situation. He could have a policy that just says that. He's the mayor. It's his job to execute the will of the Common Council. Just like Congress. There's Congress, and they make laws and like delegate funds, and then there's the executive branch, the president, and he's supposed to make sure that all the laws that Congress enacts and the previous Congress had enacted are executed and enforced, and he spends the money where they have delegated him to spend money, or her to spend money, and this is how it's. And then that also is like, hey, you know, sometimes he gives requests like, hey, we need money for this stuff that you're asking me to do. You can't just not fund something because I can't enforce something. I don't have money to hire officers to enforce, or whatever it happens to be. But yeah, no, these people are.
We don't follow the policies that the city has in place to review.
We're done with you.
Because we were
Goodbye.
Actually,
I don't know what you...
have you served the city or have you served yourself? Because we know what you've done, Mayor. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
Good evening. I wrote up something to say tonight, but I ain't gonna say it. I'll email it to you guys. I just, as a citizens, I feel like, you know, it don't matter what we say, really. Like, you have Mr. Robinson up here, who's been attacked for how long now? And I don't know what you guys thought, but like, I'm not gonna settle for that. Mr. Marshall, you wanted to know why we needed a civilian review board? For the fact of one of your 911 operators reaching out to me, out of all people, sending me an email. Mr. Mayor, you know about it. We discussed this. Police chief, you know what I'm talking about. We discussed this. You do. You do. I sent the... Excuse me. Mr. J.R., aren't you our next alderman, correct? You know about what I'm talking about. The 911 operator reaches out to me about what injustices are going on with the police. That's why we need...
If there's an injustice and it's going on, then reach up the chain of command. There are mechanisms in place. So they're reading, like, you witness a crime and then, like, I don't know, you just decide to, like, phone, you know, your grandmother in 2 states over to tell her about it and say how it sucks. Like, if you witness a crime, why don't you call the police department? Why don't you, you know, if you have a problem with an officer or superior, you go above them. You say, hey, listen, I'd like to file a formal complaint. My superior's playing grab ass. They're doing this. They're burying evidence. They're doing... whatever the accusation, you don't just go to, like, well, I happen to know this guy and he's outspoken and he goes to common council meetings and blah, blah, blah. Like, you're a rando. You can go to a random on the street to file a formal complaint. You don't have a formal complaint. Like, what do you think the CRB is going to be? They're not taking anonymous complaints. You're going to create a civilian review board for the police department. They're going to take affidavits. They're going to take your affidavit of your complaint. They're going to take your phone number, your name, your address, and they are going to review it. And I'm pretty sure if you file a false complaint, that's perjury. It might not be perjury, but filing a false complaint has its own thing. So, like, good luck to all the people that are like, well, that's not how I saw it. Like, well, we pulled body cam footage and it showed that, like, literally you're trying to get this officer sent to prison for something dumb. Like, if it was up to me, like, you wouldn't be getting perjury charges. If you're saying that he did this, or that, and it's going to send him 10 years in jail, guess what? He filed a false complaint that was going to put another man in jail for 10 years. It's like, sure, you're going to spend 10 years in jail. That's it was up to me. That's not how the legal system works. They're going to give him a slap on the wrist, like 6 months or $200 fine for almost ruining a man's life. Yeah, because that's fair. Yeah. Apparently they talk like Muggsy or whatever his name was from.
So the 911 operator doesn't have to reach out to me, a lonely citizen who can't do anything.
Lonely, huh?
But come here and ask you guys to do your job. That's why we need a civilian review board. I'll get the emails to you guys. You guys know what happened at the old folks' house and the old folks' home and what was going on there, and you guys didn't want to investigate, and then you guys get rid of the lady and badger her until she's gone, and she sues Olean. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Now, since we got that out of the way, how about...
Get what out of the
Mayor,
way?
Instead of vetoing what the people...
I sat on the council for 5 years. I have no idea what he's talking about. So unless it happened recently, at which point it would have been in the newspaper. Like, if it was legitimate. I know that the Times Herald is a rag, and they've vacated our area to rag report from outside of our area. But they're still, like, that. If the city's being sued, like, and they're not jumping on it, like...
Right? How about you do something real for the taxpayers? When's Allegheny gonna pay our water bill? How long do they get to get our shit for free? You don't want to do anything about that, huh? You just stay quiet. Where's the unanimous people about that? They scared to show up about their own bill? Well, down there in Allegheny, they laughing at us. Because of you. Letting them get away with everything. Didn't want to come up here and veto something the people do. Every time the people do something, you try to go behind us. If you don't like what the people doing, get out. Make it easier. Alderman, please. I'm not going to say anything about the Civilian Review Board because you guys already said it in October. If you guys don't believe what you said, then it'll get voted differently. If you believe what you said, we ain't got nothing to worry about. Mr. Crawford, you are my alderman. I'm the loudest citizen in Olean. If you can't represent me and my family, don't ask me for my vote no more. Ask the mayor who you always stand with. I'm tired of this. I'm doing everything that I can as a citizen. Do I need to run? Is that what I need to do? That's what I tell people to do. If they're not happy with what's going on, run. If I need to run, tell me, please. I'm not scared. We all know that. Do your guys' job as a city council, please. Stop letting this man dictate everything. I know you guys think that you don't have no power, but you're the city council. If you guys don't have no power, why do we have to vote for a city council? I'm done. Thank you.
Anyone else?
What a lot of my fellow citizens have also said. This isn't
So
an
this
us
is
versus
Jason
them
Clements' daughter.
situation. That's the driver of, what I
And she's kind of like
last
Max
time.
Garvin, I think is the kid's name.
But another thing that I definitely do want to emphasize and kind of leave you with is that this is the second time that you've heard my dad's story. Now, I don't know if the Civilian Review Board would have helped my dad when this happened and occurred.
Just the way, I get it. Like, all right, so the younger people in the room don't have the best speeches, right? Like, they're not as confident. But she, like, the heartstring she's pulling here makes it sound like her dad was shot by the police officers, right? Like, he had the N-word written on his car. Like, I don't know if it was spray paint, I don't know if it was scratched in, we've already gone over this. But, yeah, it's like, that's the heartstring she's pulling at here. And, like, she's doing a better job than Max did, but, like, Dr. Gary, I got to give him credit. Danny Gayton, Ty Malone, even Pab, they exude confidence in their speeches, and they do a little homework, and they write them before they come up here, right? But, like, and I'm sure the kids do too, but they don't have that confidence exuding that, you know what I mean? Even though the kids have more theirs is a little more genuine. The other ones are just spitting nonsense, and they exude confidence, so it makes them sound like they're better, right? That's the rub. And I've used that twice. So, but we're just gonna skip ahead, and then they call public comment closed.
Has presented to the Common Council bills and claims against the City of Olean, totaling 5. The auditor. Now therefore be it resolved that the same be and are now there each respective claim. Each unanimously.
All right, so on to resolutions.
Local law number 02-2022, PL number 89-22.
They stuck it out with you guys.
Robinson, seconded by Alderman Panis. To enact a local law establishing a civilian review board.
Okay, so just to understand the formalities here, I'm going to call on our city attorney for a moment. Is this just a yes or no vote? essentially this is to override the mayor's disapproval. It requires 2/3.
Supermajority of the
But it's
council.
just a yay or nay vote, correct?
Versus what? Like,
So yay would be to enact the local law.
like what? Like, yeah, that's semantics, John. Yay or nay? Like, yes, it's still a vote.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Not a yay or nay, like 50-50. Like yay or nay.
So at this time, would any alderman like to make a statement? Alderman Dunhall.
So I just want to say I have great respect for our police department, and it saddens me to think that something that is meant to give the community residents a voice is looked at so negatively. So I went and I looked at a few things, and reading the former Albany Chief Police Brendan Cox said, a lot of things are out there misinformation. I think people just want accountability. They want transparency. They want to know what's happening. In looking at James Desmond, talking about the effectiveness of a city review board, he had been a police officer for 29 years. He said, the benefit of police by increasing public understanding of police work, including the use of force, promoting community policing, improving the quality of internal investigations, vindicating officers and discouraging misconduct. People with complaints feel validated, regardless of the outcome, as long as they feel an independent entity listen to them carefully. He said, based on my research and survey data, I would recommend agencies impanel a citizen review board. In looking at Pamela Safer, captain of Sacramento Police, on the Police Chief magazine, she said, civilian review boards can be successful if properly implemented, and once in operation, they can build community trust with law enforcement. Cooperation will increase, people will more readily engage in contacting the police with information, and neighborhoods will be safer. And that was just a few. You know, I went through probably hundreds of articles over the past couple of weeks. And that really is it. It's not to vilify police, because I have seen our police do a wonderful job. We know that there's been some issues and some problems, and there needs to be Police Richardson to address those issues. This isn't anyone's going to come in and say, oh, this is what you need to do. That's not what it's meant to be. But I do believe that it gives us a chance to be proactive versus reactive. I can say that I had no one that was in disagreement with it, but I was contacted by several who are in agreement, some of which are here today. And I think we need to be mindful and careful to understand that the silent majority is the majority at times, right? And by the majority, I think they're the minority opinion of people who are against it. It is really meant to open lines of communications for...
First off, what the hell does that mean? So I think that the silent majority is the majority at times, and I mean the majority of people that are against it.
Groups that have felt disenfranchised for years, and that's not to say that the police are doing anything wrong, but think about it yourself. When you have an opportunity to talk and feel heard, right? Whether you quote unquote get your way or not, I think all of us feel better. So kind of going back to, this...
No, people want to be able to file a complaint, live out a lie in their head because they felt wronged, but they weren't wronged. You didn't like the way it turned out, right? You did something wrong, you're trying to just kind of like shuffle it under the rug, and you just, you lie and you say the cop did this, and, I was getting exacerbated, and I was extremely stressed out because the cop was corrupt and he was doing all these bad things, and it was really just like, no, you're driving around with an out headlight at night, and you knew your headlight was out, or, maybe you just found out and you should have pulled over, parked your car, and got out, walked home. But most people don't do that. Most people would rather, drive around, potentially cause an accident, kill themselves or others, to inconvenience themselves to like have to take time out of their day to stop and, you know, people are.
It's, you know, that people feel validated regardless of the outcome, right? It increases the understanding of police work. We all know in this moment, police work is really difficult. It is. And I appreciate all the work that our police force do. And I would encourage everybody to keep an open mind about that on all sides, because really it shouldn't be about sides. It should be about what's going to help Olean move forward and help our police department, help our residents. And so I would encourage us to keep that in mind as we go to a vote.
Anyone else? Alderman Astor?
Yeah, this is a subject that's been going on for the past couple of years. The city has listened to everyone's concerns. The city has hired Joe Bracchio, a labor attorney out of Buffalo. That cost the taxpayers, I don't have the exact amount, but probably cost the taxpayers thousands of dollars to create this law. So we took your concerns seriously. We listened to you. We tried to create a law that would benefit everybody. On October 25th, I voted for this because I assumed, you know what they say when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me? Well, I assumed because the governor, Cuomo, back at the time, created an executive order saying that all municipalities had to create.
Well, that's where you made an ass of yourself, Dave, is because the governor doesn't have the ability to force you to do something. Now, that's what sucks is the governor can like distribute the money that we rely on, which we should not be relying on the state for funding. Like we should maybe decrease the income tax for the state and say, hey, state, revamp the system. But that's the government isn't going to stop taking money from the higher ups. They're not going to do that. No, you're not going to be able to like each community should pay for its own taxes, and then you know what I mean? Like maybe, we give the money to the state to be able to pay for state troopers or something that would, you know what I mean, that cross the lines between the municipalities for the, if you don't have anybody that's willing to do extradition stuff, you know what I mean? Like that's between counties, it's, but yeah, don't listen to the governor because they don't have the power that they make you think they have, and they try to railroad the CRB down our throats.
I assumed it was law that we had to do it. And on December 13th, when I asked the question, I was told that it was not a law. It was just a recommendation by the governor's office that a civilian review board should be created. So, I too, over the last 2 weeks, have been receiving several calls, and I can only say that I received one or two that are in favor of the civilian review board. The majority of the calls have been against it. So, I guess my comment on this is we, as aldermen, are elected officials to represent certain geographic areas called wards in our cities. We know our wards, we know our areas. Instead of having a civilian review board, why can't we have a police advisory committee made up of 7 aldermen who we...
So, the alderman, so this is Dave's suggestion. Now, if anybody who knows Dave, and I've mentioned this to a few aldermen, that, I'm kind of proud of Dave for speaking up and speaking his mind at this point, because Dave's usually, follow the pack. He usually believes wherever the pack is going, gets the most amount of flack off of him. For somebody like Dave who tries to stay out of controversy and just kind of, vote with the pack, he kind of stands up here. So even though his argument for why he's changing his vote is a little on shaky ground, I mean, I'm kind of proud of him, because this is a big step for somebody who's kind of standoffish like Dave to be able to stand up to the pack and say, I'm voting the other direction, blah, blah, blah. So I'm proud of him for being able to do that, because, I'm always nope, this is how I feel, whether it's with the pack, not with the pack, this is where I feel, and this is how I stand, and this is why I stand this way. and it's more cut and dry. He's usually with the pack, so it's a big step for him to do this, and I'm kind of proud of him for that. And that's one of the reasons he's not used to it. This isn't his forte, so Joseph should let you know that like this is something that maybe
He took an oath
shouldn't
of
happen.
office to uphold the Constitution of the New York State.
You
So
kind of just deep
if somebody calls me with a complaint,
Switching over to Paulie G. This is the last meeting. He loves
Political factors, right?
that's my opinion on this issue.
Alderman Gonzalez?
Paul loves to just Dave too. So
Respectfully, the reason that is a terrible idea is because the Common Council is a political body that is elected by and influenced by political factors, right? And the judgments that need to be laid out by a civilian review board or a planning board or a zoning board need to be free from political influence, right? That's why.
that's bullshit, because political influence is just like a word that's like a catch-all, right? So if somebody on the planning board doesn't like me, maybe they don't like the color of my hair, maybe they don't like something I said about them in one of my podcasts, maybe, or the zoning board, and they say, we're not going to approve that guy's permit because so-and-so doesn't like him. Like, that's political. Because you're in political office in a certain way. You're not elected, you're appointed, but you're still holding a political position. Just because you're not elected to a position, but you're appointed by an elected official, means it's a political official. You're not washing it away of the people on the zoning board, planning board, the CRB. It's not going to be non-political. They're going to be appointed by somebody. It's just ridiculous to just assume that they are.
We have a mayoral appointed candidate that's approved by the council that can go in and interpret, execute the law and review.
So an uneducated populace would do better. I don't know. An uneducated populace appointed by the mayor, approved by the council, who are all elected officials and don't really have to be qualified either. I mean, yeah, it's like
Cases, just like the planning board does, just like the zoning board does.
Oh.
So I think the notion that this should just be the common council that just becomes a civilian review board is disastrous. It's just, there's no compromise in this situation. And we should be, supporting this. I don't know.
I mean, literally, it's just back and forth. It's just about that. That's pretty much it.
Anyone else?
Jason Panis.
I just wanted to clarify, my stance doesn't change. I don't believe anything's changed in the last 3-4 weeks, however, since we voted on this. We've discussed this for nearly 2 years, and what's on the table and been voted on is the compromise we discussed for that long amongst all of us.
I know Jason teamed up with Alderman Robinson to write and kind of like send out an olive branch, because Alderman Robinson sits out on the left side of the aisle and Jason's on the right side, and he, from what I gather, Jason put out the olive branch to say, hey, let's sit down and compromise with this, and then they present it to the rest of the council, and this is what they came up with. I think the people on the right don't think that it's gone far enough to like neuter the infiltration of other parties to influence the police department. That's my take. The last meeting where they voted on this, they were told by a lot of the people that are saying that they should vote for it tonight, we're telling them not to vote for it because it had been neutered too much and it wasn't strong enough to like shoot officers on the street, kind of like, nope, the public doesn't like this guy because one little old lady made up some story, put him to death, hang him in the streets. That's what they want. They want death to all that don't agree with him. So this is the compromise.
To me, that's why there's 7 of us. We've had the discussions. We've ironed it out.
And that's pretty much what he rambles on about. I'm gonna try to move quickly here because.
Thank you.
This is Linda's last meeting too.
I lose my voice. But when we voted on it the first time, my original vote was to vote no, for a lot of different reasons. But I think part of it was, being the previous mayor, I can tell the public that there were people that came in and complained. There were several situations that police officer were disciplined, police officer was fired. It does happen. It's you know, this whole thing about things being under the rug. Olean's not that big, folks. We all know each other. Do you know how many police officers I live by? Do you know how many neighbors have told me how safe they feel? And I know you probably think, well, she lives over on Main Street. I do. You know, I've been an elected official for 18 years. And I can tell you, I've been beaten up by the best of them, let me tell you. But I think, and I've talked to people the last couple of weeks.
I'm one of them, by the
And I
way.
think the whole thing.
I beat up on Linda quite often. We have a good working relationship.
And
She'll be missed.
It's unfair. And I think, you know, it's excuse me. It's ironic, this is my last meeting, but I can't leave. No. Sorry. I can't leave having the people that put their lives on the line every day for us think that at least one of us doesn't see that. That's all.
Okay.
So I've talked to a lot of people about this scene right here, and people that were at the meeting, people because I know originally she had a lot of those cops that she lives by. They were pretty peeved the fact that she told them that she wasn't going to vote for this because she thought it was stupid, and then at the 11th hour she voted for it, and I'm pretty sure that's what helped push her over the edge to finally losing to J.R. Benyon for the ward seat. But I asked him, I said, what do you think about her flip-flop? You think she was trying to, how would she save herself? She already lost the election, you know, and they said, I don't know. But because she lost the election, they said that the sight of the tears in here for people that were in the room said it seemed very genuine. And I'm one to believe that. So I got to give her props too. Two people I usually don't see too much eye to eye on, you know what I mean? Like, I get along great with Dave, and me and Linda, we butt heads. I'll call her a liar in the middle of a meeting, and we'll bicker and fight, and but like for her final act, she's gonna vote against the CRB, you know what I mean? Like, devil I guess, but got to give her props too. So obviously, because you can tell there's,
Thank you.
Johnny can't go without having the final word, right? If you know John.
All right. I want to go on record, first and foremost, to identify that I've always received nothing but the utmost professionalism and respect anytime I've dealt with our police department. I do appreciate wholeheartedly the work and the service they do for our community. I went back and I've reread the legislation again and again and again, and as someone who helped to draft it, working with Vernon and Jason over many, many months, I cannot find within that legislation the term where anything is punitive. All right. What I see is this collaboration and compromise. I committed to this when I agreed to work on that draft legislation to try to find a compromise that would not hinder the ability of the police to do their job.
I don't really have any notes for John here, so sorry, John, I'm cutting you short because I'm going to bed.
Second by Alderman correction, voted and talked about this previously. I did want to make a couple, there were just a couple minor spelling corrections.
Oop.
Thing that we look for.
Alderman Witt.
No.
Alderman Panis.
Yes.
Alderman Gonzalez.
Yes.
Alderwoman McCall.
Yes.
Alderman Robinson.
Yes.
I'd like to speak to that real quick. Sorry, during the vote, I know you guys are all waiting here. From what I've gathered from people that sit on these different boards and stuff, when I after I stepped down, I was replaced by Alderman McCall, and she, now obviously there was an interim, but when she won the next election, she insisted that she be called an alderwoman, and then they started calling Alderman Witt an alderwoman, and from what I heard, she was like, no, that's not my title. My title is alderman. And so they continued to, so if you notice here, and then I noticed in the next one, the clerk just goes to calling all the women on the board alderwomen, and the new alderman for Ward 3 has not spoken up to say anything yet, but I'm sure it's coming, because this is my thought on this, because it's not a gender thing, right? Like firemen, like you don't call them female firemen, you don't call them male and female firemen. They're just firemen. It's like when Congress tried to give a prayer at the beginning of the opening ceremonies, 2021, 2022, and they said "Amen" and "Ah woman," right? It's not gender specific. That's not what it is. And in the charter calls it an alderman. So to be called an alderwoman, to be called an almerex, to be called whatever you think that you should be titled, an alder, is to be the same as saying, I want to be called the superhero of Ward 1, the potato of Ward 2, the jack-in-the-box of Ward 3. That's the same thing, because the word is alderman. That's the title for it in the charter. This is what your title is. It could say the potato. It could say you were, each ward, the city is divvied up into wards, and all 7 of the wards are led by the potato for each ward. And the potato is the person that is the elected official for that ward that does, whatever the councilman's job would be, blah, blah, blah. They're not councilwomen, not councilmen, they're aldermen. That's how it's written in the charter. So that is the title. If you want to change it, change the title. But for somebody to call you differently is to essentially negate your title. And I feel like it's almost a slight against your title and or an abandonment of your duties to be called differently. You might as well just be picking an arbitrary name. Because that's not, you start rewriting it. Well, A is beginning of the, A is privileged because it's the first one in the alphabet. So we're not going to start with alderman. We're just going to be alderman. Because L is somewhere in the middle, right? That's the same way. And it's just hierarchy nonsense. Anyways, final rant for the day. I'm going to finish playing this.
Anastasia. No. President Crawford.
Yes.
5 ayes, 2 nays. Resolution passes.
They have one more resolution, just authorizing the mayor to some grant or something along those lines, and then I think it's a grant. It wasn't important enough for me to write down. It wasn't, yeah. So, on that note, all right, gang. Thanks for watching. I know it's been a long one. We're getting done just after midnight. Had a long day today. One more shout out to my daughter. I know it's 2 minutes after her birthday, but shout out to my daughter Miley for her happy 15th birthday. She had a great time in Buffalo today. We all had fun. And yeah, so other than that, guys, we'll see you next time on Life22. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and continue to send your hate mail. I'm sure somebody will find something in this video they hate too. And we'll see you guys next time.